Welcome to a fireside reading of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens, Chapter 46, Part 2. Miss Dartle and I regarded each other for a little while in silence, her manner being exactly what it was when she had produced the man. "He says, besides," she observed, with a slow curling of her lip, "that his master, as he hears, is coasting Spain, and this done is a way to gratify his seafaring tastes till he is weary. But this is of no interest to you. Between these two proud persons, mother and son, there is a wider breach than before, and little hope of its healing, for they are one at heart, and time makes each more obstinate and imperious. Neither is this of any interest to you, but it introduces what I wish to say. The devil whom you make an angel of, I mean this low girl, whom he picked out of the tide mud, with her black eyes full upon me and her passionate finger up, may be alive. For I believe some common things are hard to die. If she is, you will desire to have a pearl of such price found and taken care of. We desire that too, that he may not by any chance be made her prey again. So far we are united in one interest, and that is why I, who would do her any mischief that so coarse a wretch is capable of feeling, have sent for you to hear what you have heard." I saw by the change in her face that someone was advancing behind me. It was Mrs. Steerforth, who gave me her hand more coldly than of yore, and with an augmentation of her former stateliness of manner, but still I perceived, and I was touched by it, with an ineffaceable remembrance of my old love for her son. She was greatly altered. Her fine figure was far less upright. Her handsome face was deeply marked, and her hair was almost white. But when she sat down on the seat, she was a handsome lady still, and well I knew the bright eye with its lofty look that had been a light in my very dreams at school. "Is Mr. Copperfield informed of everything, Rosa?" "Yes." "And has he heard Littimer himself?" "Yes. I have told him why you wished it." "You are a good girl. I have had some slight correspondence with your former friend, sir," addressing me, "but it has not restored his sense of duty or natural obligation. Therefore, I have no other object in this than what Rosa has mentioned. If by the course which may relieve the mind of the decent man you brought here, for whom I am sorry I can say no more, my son may be saved from again falling into the snares of a designing enemy, well." She drew herself up and sat looking straight before her, far away. "Madam," I said respectfully, "I understand. I assure you I am in no danger of putting any strained construction on your motives. But I must say, even to you, having known this injured family from childhood, that if you suppose the girl, so deeply wronged, has not been cruelly deluded, and would not rather die 100 deaths than take a cup of water from your son's hand now, you cherish a terrible mistake." "Well, Rosa, well," said Mrs. Steerforth, as the other was about to interpose, "it is no matter, let it be." "You are married, sir, I am told." I answered that I had been some time married. "And are doing well? I hear little in the quiet life I lead, but I understand you are beginning to be famous." "I have been very fortunate," said I, "and find my name connected with some praise." "You have no mother?" in a softened voice. "No." "It is a pity," she returned. "She would have been proud of you. Good night." I took the hand she held out with a dignified, unbending air, and it was as calm in mine as if her breast had been at peace. Her pride could still its very pulses, it appeared, and draw the placid veil before her face, through which she sat looking straight before her on the far distance. As I moved away from them along the terrace, I could not help observing how steadily they both sat gazing on the prospect, and how it thickened and closed around them. Here and there some early lamps were seen to twinkle in the distant city, and in the eastern quarter of the sky the lurid light still hovered. But from the greater part of the broad valley interposed a mist was rising like a sea, which, mingling with the darkness, made it seem as if the gathering waters would encompass them. I have no reason to remember this, and think of it with awe, for before I looked upon these two again, a stormy sea had risen at their feet. Reflecting on what had been thus told me, I felt it right that it should be communicated to Mr. Peggotty. On the following evening I went into London in quest of him. He was always wandering about from place to place with his one object of recovering his niece before him, but was more in London than elsewhere. Often and often now had I seen him in the dead of night, passing along the streets, searching among the few who loitered out of doors at those untimely hours for what he dreaded to find. He kept a lodging over the little chandler's shop in Hungerford Market, which I have had occasion to mention more than once, and from which he first went forth upon his errand of mercy. Hither I directed my walk. On making inquiry for him, I learned from the people of the house that he had not gone out yet, and I should find him in his room upstairs. He was sitting reading by a window in which he kept a few plants. The room was very neat and orderly. I saw in a moment that it was always kept prepared for her reception, and that he never went out, but he thought it possible he might bring her home. He had not heard my tap at the door, and only raised his eyes when I laid my hand upon his shoulder. "Master Davy, thank ye, sir, thank ye hearty for this visit. Sit ye down. You're kindly welcome, sir." "Mr. Peggotty," said I, taking the chair he handed me, "don't expect much. I have heard some news." "Of Emily?" He put his hand in a nervous manner on his mouth and turned pale as he fixed his eyes on mine. "It gives no clue to where she is, but she is not with him." He sat down, looking intently at me, and listened in profound silence to all I had to tell. I well remember the sense of dignity, beauty even, with which the patient gravity of his face impressed me, when, having gradually removed his eyes from mine, he sat looking downward, leaning his forehead in his hand. He offered no interruption, but remained throughout perfectly still. He seemed to pursue her through the narrative, and to let every other shape go by him as if it were nothing. When I had done, he shaded his face and continued silent. I looked out of the window for a little while and occupied myself with the plants. "How do you fare to feel about it, Master Davy?" he inquired at length. "I think that she is living," I replied. "I don't know. Maybe the first shock was too rough, and in the wildness of her heart, that there blue water as she used to speak on, could she have thought of that so many years because it was to be her grave?" He said this, musing in a low, frightened voice, and walked across the little room. "And yet," he added, "Master Davy, I have felt so sure as she was living. I have knowed, awake and sleeping, as it was so true that I should find her. I have been so led on by it and held up by it that I don't believe I can have been deceived. No, Emily's alive." He put his hand down firmly on the table and set his sunburnt face into a resolute expression. "My niece Emily is alive, sir," he said steadfastly. "I don't know where it comes from or how 'tis, but I am told as she's alive." He looked almost as a man inspired as he said it. I waited for a few moments until he could give me his undivided attention, and then proceeded to explain the precaution that it had occurred to me last night it would be wise to take. "Now, my dear friend," I began. Thank ye, kind sir," he said, grasping my hand in both of his. "If she should make her way to London, which is likely, for where could she lose herself so readily as in this vast city? And what would she wish to do but lose and hide herself if she does not go home?" "And she won't go home," he interposed, shaking his head mournfully. "If she had left of her own accord, she might. Not as it was, sir." "If she should come here," said I believe there is one person here more likely to discover her than any other in the world. Do you remember? Hear what I say with fortitude. Think of your great object. Do you remember Martha of our town?" I needed no other answer than his face. "Do you know that she is in London?" "I have seen her in the streets," he answered with a shiver. "But you don't know," said I, "that Emily was charitable to her, with Ham's help, long before she fled from home, nor that when we met one night and spoke together in the room yonder over the way, she listened at the door." "Master Davy," he replied in astonishment, "that night when it snowed so hard?" "That night. I have never seen her since. I went back after parting from you to speak to her, but she had gone. I was unwilling to mention her to you then, and I am now, but she is the person of whom I speak, and with whom I think we should communicate. Do you understand?" "Too well, sir," he replied. We had sunk our voices almost to a whisper and continued to speak in that tone. "You say you have seen her. Do you think that you could find her?" "I could only hope to do so by chance." "I think, Master Davy, I know where to look." It is dark. Being together, shall we go out now and try to find her tonight? He assented and prepared to accompany me. Without appearing to observe what he was doing, I saw how carefully he adjusted the little room, put a candle ready and the means of lighting it, arranged the bed, and finally took out of a drawer one of her dresses. I remember to have seen her wear it, neatly folded with some other garments and a bonnet, which he placed upon a chair. He made no allusion to these clothes, neither did I. There they had been waiting for her many and many a night, no doubt. "The time was, Master Davy," he said as we came downstairs, "when I thought this girl, Martha, almost like the dirt underneath my Emily's feet. God forgive me. There's a difference now." As we went along, partly to hold him in conversation and partly to satisfy myself, I asked him about Ham. He said almost in the same words as formerly that Ham was just the same, wearing away his life with kinder no care no how for it, but never murmuring and liked by all. I asked him what he thought Ham's state of mind was in reference to the cause of their misfortunes, whether he believed it was dangerous, what he supposed, for example, Ham would do if he and Steerforth ever should encounter. "I don't know, sir," he replied. "I have thought of it oftentimes, but I can't awise myself of it no matters." I recalled to his remembrance the morning after her departure, when we were all there on the beach. "Do you recollect," said I, "a certain wild way in which he looked out to sea and spoke about the end of it?" "Sure I do," said he. "What do you suppose he meant?" "Master Davy," he replied, "I've put the question to myself a mort of times, and never found no answer. And there's one curious thing, that, though he is so pleasant, I wouldn't fare to feel comfortable to try and get his mind upon it. He never said a word to me as warn't as dutiful could be, and it ain't likely as he'd begin to speak any other ways now, but it's far from being fleet water in his mind, where them thoughts lays. It's deep, sir, and I can't see down." "You are right," said I, "and that has sometimes made me anxious." "And me too, Master Davy," he rejoined. "Even more so, I do assure you, than his venturesome ways, though both belongs to the alteration in him. I don't know as he'd do violence under any circumstances, but I hope as them two may be kep asunders." We had come through Temple Bar into the city, conversing no more now and walking at my side. He yielded himself up to the one aim of his devoted life, and went on, with that hushed concentration of his faculties which would have made his figure solitary in a multitude. We were not far from Blackfriars Bridge when he turned his head and pointed to a solitary female figure flitting along the opposite side of the street. I knew it readily to be the figure that we sought. We crossed the road and were pressing on towards her, when it occurred to me that she might be more disposed to feel a woman's interest in the lost girl if we spoke to her in a quieter place, aloof from the crowd, and where we should be less observed. I advised my companion, therefore, that we should not address her yet, but follow her, consulting in this likewise an indistinct desire I had to know where she went. He acquiescing, we followed at a distance, never losing sight of her, but never caring to come very near, as she frequently looked about. Once she stopped to listen to a band of music, and then we stopped too. She went on a long way. Still we went on. It was evident from the manner in which she held her course that she was going to some fixed destination, and this, and her keeping in the busy streets, and I suppose the strange fascination in the secrecy and mystery of so following anyone, made me adhere to my first purpose. At length, she turned into a dull, dark street where the noise and crowd were lost, and I said, "We may speak to her now." And mending our pace, we went after her. I hope you had no technical difficulties today. I look forward to seeing the other side of the camera. I love that word snoo as the past tense of to snow. I love Mr. Peggotty. So many of these characters are wonderful. I'm so happy to be reading it to you, and I'm so glad for your company. I read every day at 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading on Instagram. All the chapters uploaded to the YouTube channel, Fireside Reading. And I look forward very much to seeing you tomorrow. Sorry about the mishap yesterday. I hope we get to the end of the book without any more mishaps. But until I see you again, please, everyone, stay very well. Good night.